They say one choice can change your life forever, but nobody tells you how quietly that choice arrives. The storm rolled across the Tennessee hills like a living thing, rattling the windows of my pickup truck and turning the narrow dirt roads into rivers of mud. I should have been home an hour ago. My father would be worried, and Daisy, my stubborn chestnut mare, was still missing after breaking through a section of fence earlier that afternoon. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and squinted through the rain. The beams of my headlights barely reached 20 feet ahead. Every tree looked like a shadow. Every shadow looked like trouble. I kept telling myself to turn around. No horse was worth getting stranded in a storm like this. Then I saw something near the riverbank. At first, I thought it was a fallen branch. The rain distorted everything. But as my truck crawled closer, the shape became clearer. A man. My heart jumped. I slammed on the brakes and sat frozen for a second, listening to the steady drumming of rain against the roof. People didn't just appear out here. Not in the middle of nowhere. Not during a storm. Every instinct told me to drive away and call the sheriff once I got cell service. Instead, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the rain. Cold water soaked through my jacket instantly. The river roared beside me, swollen from days of heavy weather. The man lay half on the rocky bank and half in the wet grass. He wasn't moving. For one terrifying second, I thought I was too late. Then I noticed the slow rise and fall of his chest. Relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. He was alive. Up close, he looked completely out of place. His dark coat was expensive. His boots probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Even covered in mud and rain, there was something about him that screamed city, power, money. None of it belonged here. A small metallic object rested loosely in his hand. I carefully moved it away before kneeling beside him. His face was pale. Rainwater ran across sharp features that looked like they belonged on a magazine cover rather than a riverbank in rural Tennessee. "Hey," I shouted over the storm. "Can you hear me?" No response. I checked for injuries the best I could without moving him too much. He seemed exhausted more than anything else, as if he'd pushed himself far beyond his limits. Another roll of thunder shook the valley. I looked toward the road, then back at the stranger. The nearest ambulance was at least 40 minutes away on a good day. Tonight, it might never make it. I knew what I should do. I also knew what I was going to do. 20 minutes later, with more determination than common sense, I managed to get him into the passenger seat of my truck. As I climbed behind the wheel, lightning flashed across the sky. For a brief moment, I caught sight of several distant headlights moving along the ridge above the river. Watching, searching, my stomach tightened. I started the engine. Because somewhere deep down, I suddenly knew one thing. The man I had just rescued wasn't running from the storm. He was running from something far more dangerous. The storm finally began to weaken sometime after midnight, but the wind still rattled the old farmhouse windows hard enough to keep me awake. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring toward the living room where the stranger slept on our couch. The yellow glow from a single lamp stretched across the hardwood floor, painting long shadows over everything it touched. He had not moved in nearly an hour. Not even once. Most people would have left him for the authorities. Most people would have called for help and washed their hands of the whole situation. I kept reminding myself that I was not most people. My father shuffled into the kitchen wearing faded flannel pajamas and rubbing sleep from his eyes. He glanced toward the living room before lowering himself into a chair across from me. "Still awake?" he asked quietly. I nodded, still worried. He followed my gaze. About him. About whoever might be looking for him. My father did not answer immediately. He simply looked out the dark window where rain still dripped from the porch roof. "You did the right thing, Emily." I wished I believed that. Around 2 in the morning, I heard movement. The sound was small, just a shift against the couch cushions, but it was enough to send my heart racing. I stood and walked carefully into the living room. The stranger was awake. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. For a second, he looked confused, lost. Then his gaze locked onto mine. I froze. There was something intense about those eyes. Not threatening, just alert, like a man who spent his life expecting danger around every corner. "You are safe?" I said softly. His brow furrowed. He tried to sit up too quickly and immediately winced. "Easy." I stepped closer. "You have been through a lot." He looked around the room as though seeing it for the first time. The quilt draped over him. The family photographs on the walls. The old stone fireplace. None of it seemed familiar. Where am I? His voice sounded rough from exhaustion. Outside of Cedar Creek, Tennessee. He stared at me. How did I get here? I found you near the river. Confusion deepened across his face. He looked down at his hands, then around the room again. River, he repeated. I do not remember a river. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Do you remember your name? For several long seconds he said nothing. The silence stretched between us. Finally he spoke. Adrian. Relief washed across his face as if he had grabbed onto the only solid thing left in the world. My name is Adrian. Last name. His expression blanked. He tried to answer. Failed. Tried again. Nothing. I watched uncertainty spread through him. Real uncertainty. Not the kind someone fakes. The kind that frightens them. I do not know, he admitted quietly. I cannot remember. The room suddenly felt smaller. Do you remember where you live? He shook his head. Family. Another shake. Friends. Nothing. I sat down in the chair beside the couch. You do not remember anything? His eyes narrowed with concentration. I remember pieces. What kind of pieces? Rain. He stared toward the window. Headlights. His hand moved to his temple. A road. Maybe. Then he looked at me. After that, nothing. Morning arrived slowly. Gray sunlight filtered through the clouds as the storm drifted east. By breakfast, Adrian was sitting at our kitchen table drinking coffee while my father pretended not to study him. The stranger looked completely out of place, surrounded by old family furniture and hand-stitched curtains. Yet somehow he also looked more relaxed than he had the night before. I noticed him staring out the window toward the fields beyond the barn. Beautiful, he said quietly. I smiled. You do not get much of that wherever you came from? Something flickered across his face. A memory almost surfacing, then disappearing again. No, he said softly. I do not think I do. The answer should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me uneasy. Because somewhere beyond those rolling hills, someone had been searching for him in the middle of a storm. And something told me that sooner or later, they were going to find him. Some people spend their entire lives searching for peace. Adrian found it by accident on a small farm he could not even remember choosing. 3 days passed before the sun finally returned. The storm damage around Cedar Creek kept everyone busy. Fences needed repairs. Fallen branches covered the roads. The creek behind our property had nearly doubled in size. Through it all, Adrian stayed. Not because he had anywhere else to go, because he did not. Every morning I expected some memory to return and send him rushing back to whatever life he had forgotten. Every morning he woke up with the same blank spaces in his mind. Yet something strange happened during those 3 days. He stopped looking like a man lost in the wilderness and started looking like he belonged there. On the 4th morning, I found him outside helping my father repair a broken section of fencing. The sight nearly made me laugh. His expensive clothes had been replaced by old jeans and a work shirt that belonged to my dad. Neither fit particularly well. Mud covered his boots. Sunlight reflected off the hammer in his hand. He looked completely different from the man I had pulled from the river. You are holding it wrong, my father called. Adrian looked down at the hammer. Apparently I am. Apparently? My father chuckled. Son, there is no apparently about it. For the first time since arriving, Adrian smiled. It was brief, almost reluctant, but it changed his entire face. I stood on the porch watching them for several seconds before either noticed me. Good morning, Adrian said. You look comfortable, I replied. He glanced at the fence and shrugged. I think I am. That answer stayed with me all day, because comfort did not seem like something he experienced often. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for supplies. Adrian came with me. Cedar Creek only had one grocery store, one diner, and one gas station. Everybody knew everybody, which meant everybody wanted to know who Adrian was. By the time we reached the diner, half the town had already noticed him. Mrs. Jenkins from the bakery smiled at him from across the street. Old Sheriff Turner studied him over a cup of coffee. Teenagers sitting outside the hardware store whispered as we walked by. Adrian seemed unaware of all of it. Or maybe he was simply used to attention. We sat in a booth near the window. He spent several minutes staring at the people moving along Main Street. What is it? I asked. Nothing. He paused. Everything. I laughed. That makes no sense. I know. His eyes followed a young mother helping her daughter cross the street. It just feels familiar somehow. The town. No, he looked thoughtful. The feeling. I understood exactly what he meant. Cedar Creek was not special because of its buildings or roads. It was special because people looked after one another. They remembered birthdays. They carried groceries for elderly neighbors. They showed up when someone needed help. Maybe Adrian remembered that feeling even if he could not remember where it came from. As evening approached, we headed back toward the farm. The sky glowed orange across the rolling hills. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Adrian suddenly stiffened beside me. I noticed it immediately. "What is wrong?" I asked. He stared into the side mirror. "I do not know." A strange tension settled over him. "I just have the feeling someone is watching us." I glanced behind the truck. The road was empty except for distant fields and telephone poles. "There is nobody there." He continued staring for several more seconds, then slowly relaxed. "Maybe you are right." But he did not sound convinced. That night, after everyone went to bed, I looked out my bedroom window toward the driveway below. Moonlight washed across the property. Everything seemed quiet, peaceful, normal. Then I noticed a pair of headlights far beyond our fence line, parked on the distant ridge overlooking the farm. The vehicle remained there for less than a minute before disappearing into the darkness. And somehow I knew the peace Adrian had found was running out of time. The next morning began like every other morning in Cedar Creek. Sunlight spilled across the fields. Birds settled on fence posts. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the farmhouse kitchen. For a few hours, it felt as though the strange tension from the night before had never existed. I almost convinced myself that the vehicle on the ridge had belonged to a traveler who had taken a wrong turn. Almost. Adrian was outside repairing a gate near the barn when I carried him a bottle of water just after noon. He thanked me with that quiet smile I had started seeing more often lately. It was strange how quickly he had become part of our daily lives. A week earlier, he had been a stranger lying unconscious beside a river. Now he knew which horse liked apples and which one would steal your hat if you stood too close. He knew my father's favorite fishing spot and the exact creak the front porch made when someone stepped on the third board from the left. Watching him laugh with my father felt natural. Too natural. That was probably why what happened next felt so unreal. The first sound reached us from miles away. A low, distant hum. At first I thought it was thunder. Then I realized the sky was perfectly clear. Adrian stopped what he was doing. The smile disappeared from his face. He turned toward the road. His entire posture changed. Every muscle tightened. Every instinct seemed suddenly awake. "Do you hear that?" he asked quietly. I nodded. The sound grew louder. Engines. Several of them. My father stepped out of the barn, wiping grease from his hands. "Expecting company?" he joked. Nobody laughed. Less than a minute later, the first black SUV appeared at the end of our driveway. Then a second. Then a third. Then two more. They moved slowly across the property like they already owned it. Dust rolled behind them in long golden clouds. My stomach dropped. The vehicles stopped 20 yards from the farmhouse. Doors opened. Men stepped out wearing dark suits despite the Tennessee heat. They looked nothing like anyone from Cedar Creek. Their movements were calm, precise, professional, the kind of people who noticed everything. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then one of the men spotted Adrian. The reaction was immediate. Relief flashed across his face. Not surprise, not confusion, relief. He walked forward quickly before stopping several feet away. "Boss," he said. The single word seemed to steal the air from the entire farm. Adrian stared at him. "What did you call me?" The man looked stunned. "Boss." Silence followed. The other men exchanged uneasy glances. I looked at Adrian. He looked at them. Nobody seemed to know what to say next. Finally, the man spoke again. "Adrian Moretti." The name hit him like a physical force. I saw it happen. His expression changed instantly. A flicker of recognition. A fragment of memory. His hand rose to his temple. "Adrian Moretti," he repeated softly. "That is my name?" "Yes, sir." The man looked genuinely confused now. "You have been missing for 8 days. Missing." The word echoed through my mind. 8 days. Adrian turned toward me. His eyes held the same uncertainty they had held beside the river. But now something else existed beneath it. Something colder, older, more dangerous. "Who am I?" he asked the man. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Then the answer came. "You are the head of the Moretti organization." My father frowned. Organization? The suited man hesitated. A business empire based in Chicago. I noticed several of the others avoiding details, choosing their words carefully. Adrian looked between them. "And what kind of business do I run?" The silence that followed was answer enough. My chest tightened, because for the first time since finding him, I understood why those men had searched through a storm. Why someone had been watching the farm. Why danger seemed to follow him like a shadow. The stranger we had welcomed into our home was not an ordinary man who had lost his way. And judging by the fear and respect in every face standing before him, he was someone the world did not easily forget. The atmosphere on the farm changed the moment those words were spoken. It was as if an invisible wall had risen between the man we knew and the man standing before us now. Nobody seemed more affected than Adrian himself. He stood motionless in the afternoon sunlight, staring at the men who had arrived for him. They watched him with a mixture of loyalty and concern, as though they were afraid he might disappear again if they looked away for too long. One of them stepped forward carrying a tablet. "Sir, perhaps seeing a few things will help." Adrian hesitated before taking it. I moved closer without realizing it. Photographs filled the screen. Expensive buildings, charity events, business meetings, private jets, crowds of people surrounding him. In every image, Adrian looked confident and composed. Powerful. The version of him in those photographs felt completely different from the man who helped repair fences and fed apples to horses. He studied each image carefully. Sometimes his expression shifted as though a memory almost surfaced. Then it vanished again. "Anything?" the suited man asked. Adrian slowly shook his head. "Pieces. That is progress. Not enough." The frustration in his voice surprised me. Until now he had accepted his memory loss with quiet patience. This was different. This was a man suddenly realizing how much of his life had been stolen from him. The men remained on the property throughout the afternoon. They set up temporary workstations inside their vehicles and spoke constantly through earpieces. Their presence transformed our peaceful farm into something unfamiliar. My father tried to act normal, but I caught him studying them more than once. Around sunset, Adrian found me sitting on the porch swing. The hills glowed gold beneath the fading light. For several moments, neither of us spoke. "You are afraid of me now," he finally said. I looked toward the fields. "I do not know what to think." He nodded. "Fair enough. Did you know?" I asked quietly. "Know what?" "That you were important." A faint smile touched his face. "No, not even a little." He laughed softly. "Emily. 3 days ago I could barely remember my own name." I wanted to laugh with him, but the knot in my chest remained. "Your people seem terrified of disappointing you." His gaze drifted toward the line of black vehicles parked near the barn. "That worries me too." The answer caught me off guard. "Why?" "Because every time they look at me, they expect someone I cannot remember being." The honesty in his voice made my heart ache. For the first time, I realized how frightening this situation must be for him. Everyone around him seemed to know exactly who Adrian Moretti was except Adrian Moretti himself. The sun disappeared completely. Crickets filled the evening air. Lights flickered on across the property. One by one, the suited men retreated toward their vehicles. Adrian remained beside me. "There is something else," he said. "What?" "I remember a feeling." I turned toward him. "What kind of feeling?" His eyes met mine. "Loneliness." The answer surprised me more than anything else he had said all day. Not power, not wealth, not success. Loneliness. That is what I remember most. He looked away toward the darkening horizon, and I do not think I liked the man I used to be. Before I could respond, one of the men approached from the driveway. His expression looked troubled. "Sir, we have a problem." Adrian immediately stood. "What happened?" The man lowered his voice. "Someone has been making inquiries about this location." Every trace of calm disappeared from his face. "Who?" "We are not sure yet." The man glanced briefly toward me before continuing. "But whoever they are, they know someone brought you here." A cold chill traveled down my spine. Because deep down, I already knew the danger had never been looking for Adrian alone. Now it knew exactly where to find the people who had helped him. Sleep became impossible after that conversation. Every creak of the farmhouse sounded louder. Every passing car on the distant highway felt suspicious. The peaceful rhythm of Cedar Creek had always made me feel safe. Now it felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with one careless touch. The next morning the farm looked unchanged. The horses grazed in the pasture. My father worked on an old tractor. Sunlight covered the fields in gold. Yet beneath the surface, everything was different. The black SUVs remained parked near the barn. Men in dark suits quietly monitored the property. Adrian spent most of the morning inside the farmhouse with 2 of his senior advisors. Through the kitchen window, I could see documents spread across the dining room table. Photographs, Reports. Names. Pieces of a life he could not remember. Around noon, he stepped outside alone. His expression looked troubled. More troubled than I had seen since the day his people arrived. Any memories? I asked. He shook his head. Not enough. He sat beside me on the porch steps. Apparently, I have hundreds of employees. Properties in multiple states. More responsibilities than I can count. That sounds overwhelming. He laughed softly. That is a polite way to describe it. For several moments we watched the wind move through the fields. Then his expression darkened. There is something else. What? According to my advisors, there are people who would benefit from my disappearance. A chill ran through me. You mean competitors? He looked toward the horizon. Something like that. The careful way he answered told me there was far more he was not saying. Before I could ask another question, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. One of the advisors stepped out carrying a folder. He approached Adrian immediately. Sir, we need to talk. Adrian stood. Now. Yes. The seriousness in the man's voice erased any possibility of delay. They walked toward the barn together. Nearly an hour passed before Adrian returned. When he did, his face had become unreadable. What happened? I asked. He sat beside me again. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he released a slow breath. They want me to leave. My heart sank. Leave Cedar Creek? He nodded. Immediately. I looked away toward the fields. I had known this moment would eventually come. The farm had never been his home. It had only been a temporary refuge. Still, hearing the words hurt more than I expected. And what do you want? I asked quietly. Adrian stared at the distant hills. That is the problem. Why? He looked at me. Because I do not want to go. The honesty in his voice caught me completely off guard. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The afternoon breeze moved through the porch railings. Somewhere across the property, a horse whinnied softly. Your people seem convinced it is dangerous here, I said. They are. Then maybe they are right. He nodded. Probably. Then why stay? His eyes held mine. Because this is the first place I have felt human in a very long time. The words settled heavily between us. Before I could respond, raised voices echoed from near the driveway. Adrian immediately stood. Several of the suited men were speaking urgently into their phones. One of them hurried toward us. Sir. His voice sounded strained. We just confirmed something. Adrian's expression hardened. What? The man glanced briefly toward me before answering. The inquiries about this farm were not random. Silence followed. Someone specifically asked about Emily Carter. Every drop of color seemed to drain from Adrian's face. And for the first time since finding him beside that river, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Fear changes the way a person sees the world. Before that moment, the farm had felt protected by distance, hidden among rolling hills and quiet roads. After hearing my name spoken by one of Adrian's advisors, every familiar thing suddenly felt exposed. The wind through the trees sounded different. The long gravel driveway seemed too open. Even the porch where I drank coffee every morning no longer felt entirely safe. Adrian remained silent for several seconds after hearing the news. His jaw tightened. His eyes never left the advisor. How certain are we? He asked. Completely certain, the man replied. The questions were specific. Name, address, family information. My stomach dropped. Who is asking? I asked. The advisor hesitated. We do not know yet. Adrian took a slow breath. Something about him had changed. Not physically. The man standing beside me was still the same person who repaired fences and laughed with my father. Yet another side of him had surfaced. Calm, focused, protective. Emily goes nowhere alone, he said. The advisor nodded immediately. Already arranged. I frowned. Hold on. Nobody is arranging anything. Adrian turned toward me. This is serious. I know it is serious. Then let us act like it. His voice remained calm, but the concern behind it was impossible to miss. For a moment we stared at each other. Then my father stepped onto the porch. What is happening? He asked. Nobody answered right away. Finally I explained everything. My father listened carefully. The older he got, the quieter he became when something worried him. By the time I finished, his expression had become unreadable. Then maybe it is time for our guest to leave, he said softly. The words hit harder than I expected. Adrian looked away first. I was already considering it. Silence settled over the porch. Deep down, I knew my father was right. Trouble had arrived with Adrian. Even if none of this was his fault. Yet the thought of him leaving created a strange ache in my chest. One I did not want to examine too closely. That evening, the farm felt unusually quiet. Several advisors held meetings inside the barn. Vehicles came and went. Phone calls never seemed to stop. Adrian spent most of the evening helping my father repair a storage shed damaged during the storm. Watching them work together felt oddly normal considering everything happening around us. As the sun began to set, I walked toward the pasture carrying a bucket of feed. The horses gathered near the fence as usual. Their familiar presence calmed me. Animals did not care about secrets or missing memories or dangerous people asking questions. They only cared whether you brought food. I smiled as Daisy nudged my shoulder. At least somebody around here still has simple priorities. She likes you. Adrian's voice came from behind me. I turned. He stood several feet away with his hands in his pockets. She likes food, I corrected. That too. We shared a small laugh. Then the silence returned. This time it felt different. Softer somehow. I am leaving tomorrow, he said quietly. The words landed exactly where I knew they would. Your advisors finally convinced you? No, he looked toward the distant hills. You did. I frowned. I did not say anything. You did not have to. He smiled sadly. I brought danger here. You did not ask for any of this. Maybe not. His eyes found mine. But I cannot stay and pretend it is not happening. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The evening light painted everything gold. The fields, the fence posts, the farmhouse in the distance. It looked like a photograph I wished could last forever. Will you remember us? I asked before thinking. Adrian's expression softened immediately. Emily. The way he said my name made my heart skip. You are the one thing I could never forget. Before I could answer, one of the advisors appeared near the barn waving urgently. Sir. Adrian turned. What happened? The advisor approached quickly. His face had gone pale. We identified who has been asking about the farm. Every trace of warmth vanished from the moment. Who? Adrian asked. The advisor swallowed hard. Someone from your own organization. The advisor's words seemed to freeze the air around us. Adrian did not react immediately. If anything, he became even calmer. That frightened me more than anger ever could. Who? He asked. The advisor glanced around before lowering his voice. Vincent Russo. The name clearly meant something to everyone except me. Several of the men nearby exchanged uneasy looks. Adrian remained silent. He has been asking questions for days, the advisor continued. About the farm. About Emily. About your condition. Adrian stared into the distance. For a moment, he looked as though he was listening to something only he could hear. Then he pressed a hand against his temple. I know that name. Everyone went still. You remember him? The advisor asked. Adrian closed his eyes. Not completely. His breathing slowed. But I know I do not trust him. A strange feeling passed through the group. Relief mixed with concern. It was the first meaningful memory he had recovered. Yet somehow it only created more questions. That evening nobody talked about leaving anymore. The original plan had been simple. Adrian would return to Chicago. The danger would stay with him. Now that danger had followed him here from someone inside his own organization. Nothing felt simple anymore. Additional vehicles arrived after sunset. More advisors. More security personnel. The quiet farm resembled a command center by midnight. Lights remained on in the barn. Phones rang constantly. Maps covered folding tables. Through it all, Adrian seemed focused on one thing. Me. Every time I crossed the property, someone accompanied me. Every time I stepped outside, Adrian somehow knew where I was. It became impossible to ignore. Around 10 that night, I found him standing alone near the horse pasture. Moonlight reflected across the fields. The farm looked peaceful again. Almost normal. You should be sleeping, I said. He smiled faintly. So should you. I leaned against the fence beside him. Your people are worried. They have reasons. Are you? For a moment he did not answer. Then he nodded. Yes. The honesty surprised me. Because of Vincent? No, his eyes found mine. Because of you. My heartbeat stumbled. Me? You saved a stranger beside a river. His voice remained soft. You brought him home. You gave him a chance to recover when nobody else would have. He looked away toward the hills. Now that decision is creating problems for your family. I do not regret it. The answer came instantly. Adrian studied me for several seconds. You should. Why? Because your life was simpler before I arrived. I laughed quietly. Maybe. Emily. His voice carried a seriousness that made me stop smiling. If things become worse, I need you to promise something. What? Leave. I stared at him. What? Take your father and leave Cedar Creek. No, Emily. No, the word echoed across the fence line. I'm not running away from my own home. Something warm appeared in his expression then. Pride perhaps. Admiration. You are stubborn. My father says it is a family trait. For the first time all day, Adrian laughed. The sound felt genuine. Real. For a few precious seconds, everything else disappeared. The danger. The uncertainty. The secrets. Then headlights appeared at the far edge of the property. Every vehicle near the barn immediately came alive with activity. Men reached for radios. Doors opened. Adrian's smile vanished. What happened? I asked. One of the advisors ran toward us. His face looked pale beneath the moonlight. Sir. Adrian stepped forward. Tell me. The man swallowed hard. We just intercepted a message. Silence followed. Vincent is not looking for you anymore. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Then who is he looking for? The advisor turned toward me. Emily. The moment my name left the advisor's mouth, everything changed. Not because I suddenly felt afraid. Because I saw the look in Adrian's eyes. Until then, he had been trying to balance two worlds. The powerful life waiting for him somewhere beyond Cedar Creek and the quiet life he had accidentally found here. That balance disappeared instantly. How soon? Adrian asked. His voice had become calm again. The kind of calm that comes before an important decision. We do not know, the advisor replied. But we believe Vincent knows exactly where she is. Adrian nodded once. Then we stopped waiting. Within an hour, the entire farm seemed to move with purpose. Advisors gathered inside the barn. Phone calls were made. Plans were discussed. Yet through all the activity, Adrian never drifted far from me. I found him just before sunrise, standing alone near the edge of the pasture. The sky glowed pale blue across the hills. Morning mist floated above the fields. It looked exactly like every other sunrise in Cedar Creek. Somehow that made everything harder. You never slept? I said. He smiled faintly. Neither did you. I stopped beside him. For a moment, we simply watched the sunrise together. Then he released a slow breath. I remember more now. My heart skipped. What do you remember? Not details. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon. Feelings, such as responsibility. He paused. Pressure. Expectations. He looked down at his hands. People constantly wanting something from me. I listened quietly. And Adrian turned toward me. I remember never feeling happy. The honesty of the answer left me speechless. Not once. He shook his head. Until I came here. The wind moved gently through the grass around us. Somewhere behind the barn, a rooster announced the morning. Emily, he said softly. Do you know what the strangest part is? What? I cannot remember most of my life. His eyes met mine. But I remember exactly how I felt the first time I saw you standing beside that couch after I woke up. My heart began beating faster. Neither of us looked away. For the first time since finding him beside the river, neither of us pretended this was only about gratitude or circumstance. Something real had grown between us. Something neither danger nor uncertainty could erase. A vehicle approached from the driveway. One of the advisors stepped out carrying a folder. Adrian immediately knew what it meant. The moment had ended. Reality had returned. The advisor approached carefully. Sir. Adrian nodded. Tell me. The board wants an answer. I frowned. What board? Adrian looked toward the farmhouse. The people who helped build my organization. The advisor opened the folder. They want you back in Chicago immediately. Silence followed. And if I refuse? Adrian asked. The advisor hesitated. They believe your judgment has been compromised. A bitter smile crossed Adrian's face. Because I care about someone? Nobody answered. They did not have to. The answer was obvious. Adrian looked at the folder, then at the farmhouse, then at me. The decision seemed surprisingly easy. Tell them no. The advisor blinked. Sir, tell them no. His voice remained steady. Tell them Emily Carter saved my life. He stepped closer. Tell them I will not abandon her. The advisor stared for several seconds before slowly nodding. After he left, I looked at Adrian in disbelief. You are really choosing this? He smiled. No. I am choosing you. The simplicity of the answer took my breath away. Hours later, as sunlight filled the valley, the black SUVs finally began leaving the farm. One by one, they disappeared down the gravel road. The tension that had dominated Cedar Creek for days slowly faded. Adrian stood beside me watching them go. What happens now? I asked. He looked across the fields that had become his refuge. Then he looked at me. I saved an empire for years. His hand gently found mine. Maybe it is time I protect what actually matters.